road, the fences, and the horizon in one white breath. Caleb Turner stood at his kitchen window, watching snow slam sideways against the glass, and felt that familiar knot tighten in his chest, the one that told him something wasn't right. He had lived on the edge of the plains for nearly 20 years, long enough to respect storms and longer still to listen to his instincts. Tonight, both were shouting. His nearest neighbor, Arthur Bell, lived almost a mile away, close enough to be seen on clear days, far enough that help didn't come quickly. Arthur was old, sick, and stubborn, coughing himself thin through the winter. Caleb had checked on him that morning, left a sack of firewood by the door. Now, well past midnight, Arthur's porch light still burned through the snow like a lonely star. That light should have been off hours ago. Caleb pulled on his coat, wrapped a scarf around his face, and stepped outside. The cold hit him like a punch. Wind tore at his clothes and filled his ears with a roar that drowned out thought. Each step toward the truck felt heavier than the last, snow already piling around his boots. He drove as far as the road allowed, then abandoned the truck and went on foot, leaning into the storm. By the time Arthur's house came into view, Caleb's lashes were crusted with ice. The porch light flickered wildly. The front door hung open, banging softly against the frame. That sound, slow, hollow, set his heart racing. Inside, the house smelled of cold metal and sickness. The stove was dead, ashes gray and untouched. "Arthur," Caleb called, shrugging off his coat. No answer came, only the wind sneaking through cracks in the walls. He moved down the narrow hall to the bedroom and found Arthur lying on top of the blankets, fully clothed, eyes open and unfocused. Caleb knelt beside him, took his hand. It was cold, but not gone. "Arthur, it's Caleb," he said, loud and steady. Arthur's chest rose with effort, each breath rattling like gravel in a jar. His lips moved. "She's outside," Arthur whispered, voice barely more than air. "The girl. Don't let them." Before Caleb could ask who, or where, Arthur's eyes slid shut. His chest shuddered once, then stilled. The silence that followed was so complete it rang. Caleb stayed there for a heartbeat too long, shock numbing him, then stood abruptly. Outside. The girl. His pulse hammered as he turned and rushed back into the storm. The wind had worsened, erasing his tracks almost instantly. Snow swirled in blinding sheets, turning the world into a spinning void. Caleb circled the house, shouting, scanning with desperate eyes. That's when he heard it. Not the wind, not the creak of the barn, but something thinner. A sound like breath catching, like a whimper swallowed by cold. He followed it to the back of the property, where an old wooden shed leaned crookedly against a drift. Snow had buried the door halfway up. Caleb wrenched it open, muscles screaming, and froze. A woman lay slumped against the inner wall, knees drawn to her chest, wrapped in a thin shawl that did nothing against the cold. Her dark hair was tangled and stiff with ice. Her skin was pale, lips blue, eyes half-lidded. For one terrifying moment, Caleb thought he was too late. "Hey," he said urgently, dropping to his knees. "Hey, can you hear me?" He touched her cheek. It was like touching stone. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharp with fear. She tried to pull away, but her body wouldn't obey. "Please," she whispered, the word breaking in the air. "Please, don't leave me." Caleb didn't waste another second. He scooped her up, startled by how light she was, how fragile. Her head fell against his chest, breath shallow and uneven. Snow bit into his face as he staggered back toward his house, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The storm fought him every step of the way. He slipped once, nearly falling, tightening his grip as panic surged. "Stay with me," he muttered, whether to her or himself he didn't know. Her fingers twitched weakly against his coat, and that small movement fueled him forward. When he finally burst through his own front door, warmth rushed over them both. He kicked it shut, laid her gently on the couch, and wrapped her in every blanket he owned. Her eyes never left his face, wide and terrified, as if afraid he might vanish like everyone else had. "You're safe now," Caleb said, voice rough. "I've got you." Outside, the wind screamed its last threats against the walls. Inside, beside the fire, a woman pulled back from the edge of death while the truth of Arthur Bell's final, desperate words began to sink in. Morning came slowly, as if the sun itself hesitated to rise over the white-locked land. Pale light filtered through the windows, casting long blue shadows across the room. Caleb had not slept. He sat in the chair opposite the couch, watching the woman breathe, counting each rise and fall of her chest like a prayer. Sometime before dawn, her shivering had eased. Now she slept, wrapped in layers of wool, color returning faintly to her cheeks. When she stirred, it was with a small sound of confusion. Her eyes opened, dark and searching, panic flaring until she saw him. Caleb raised his hand slightly, keeping his voice calm. "You're safe," he said again, slower this time. "The storm's over." She swallowed, then nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. Her accent was soft, her English careful, as if each word cost effort. "My name, Elena." He brought her a mug of warm broth, helping her sit up. Her hands trembled as she held it, but she drank, color deepening in her face. As the warmth spread, the story came out in fragments. She had traveled far, answering letters written by Arthur Bell, a man she had believed kind and lonely. He had promised her shelter, a quiet life, respect. When she arrived, Arthur was already very ill. He tried, she said, to protect her, to keep his relatives at bay. But illness had drained his strength, and money had grown scarce. "They said I was not family," Elena said, eyes fixed on the cup. "They said I was. A mistake." When the storm warnings came, Arthur's relatives had argued in the kitchen while Arthur lay coughing in bed. Elena had been pushed toward the shed, told it was only for a little while. Then they had driven away, leaving her with a thin shawl and a locked door as the snow began to fall. Caleb's jaw tightened as he listened. He knew those relatives by reputation, people who smelled opportunity in weakness. He also knew Arthur well enough to believe he had never intended this. The old man's last words echoed in his mind. Later that morning, the sheriff arrived, hat in hand, boots still dusted with snow. He confirmed Arthur Bell's death and offered his condolences. Then his expression shifted, turning formal. "There's something else," he said. "Arthur updated his will a few days ago." Caleb felt his stomach drop. Elena sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, as if bracing herself for more bad news. "The property, the house, the accounts," the sheriff continued, "they're all left to Elena Bell." He paused. "And Arthur named you, Caleb, as executor and guardian until things are settled." Elena looked up sharply. "Guardian?" she asked. The sheriff nodded. "Arthur wrote that he trusted you to do what's right." He cleared his throat. "There may be challenges from the family, but the will is solid." The room went very still. Caleb looked at Elena, saw disbelief bloom into something fragile and hopeful. Tears welled in her eyes. And she pressed a hand to her mouth. "He did not forget me," she said softly. News traveled fast in a small town. By afternoon, whispers followed Caleb wherever he went. Some spoke with sympathy, others with suspicion. A mail-order bride, a sudden inheritance. But Caleb stood firm. He helped Elena move into Arthur's house temporarily, made sure the stove was lit, the rooms warm. He walked her through the land, explaining fences and wells, giving her space when she needed it. They buried Arthur beneath the cottonwoods 2 days later. The ground was hard, but the sky was clear. Elena stood straight through the service, clutching a small bouquet of dried flowers. When it was over, she placed them gently on the grave and whispered something in her own language, a farewell, perhaps a promise. Winter eased into spring. Elena learned the rhythms of the place, her confidence growing with each passing day. She learned to ride, to tend the animals, to laugh at Caleb's dry jokes. The fear that once shadowed her eyes faded, replaced by a quiet strength that surprised everyone who met her. When Arthur's relatives tried to contest the will, they failed. The truth of what they had done in the storm came out, and the town turned its back on them. What remained was something no one had expected. The woman who had nearly died in the snow became the heart of the valley, kind, steady, unafraid to work. And Caleb, who had gone out into a blizzard because a porch light burned too long, found his life reshaped by that single choice. What shocked the town most wasn't the scandal or the inheritance, but how two broken paths crossed in the cold and led, together, toward something whole.